Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Why. Today we're going to do something a little different. As you might imagine, you might be able to see that this is not Jordana. This is Alex Reich. And today we're going to be talking about a list of things, but primarily what it means to be a man in the 21st century. Coming into true godly masculinity. We're going to talk a little bit about Alex, get a little background on him, and then we're going to dive right into those subjects for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So stay with us as we get behind the why and what it means to be a man today. Okay, before we do that, why don't you go ahead and hit that bell? Go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Remember, what we like you to do is to share this conversation with as many people as you can. We like to get this conversation spread abroad because the more people get involved, the more ignorance is destroyed. And the more ignorance is destroyed, well, the better off we're going to be. So let's get into this. Masculinity.
That's
So
right.
when you hear that word masculinity, what comes to your mind?
I think of so much 80s action movies, maybe.
Little Rambo.
Hard to go
action?
wrong there. Yeah,
A
some
little-
Stallone action.
Okay.
No, there's a lot of difference depending on how you want to word it, really. Like in what context of masculinity, right?
Okay. So let's think of it this way. Let's think about your journey now into manhood. Okay. So you came out of high school with an idea. You had planned on what were you planning on doing? What was your goal for life?
With life,
Mm-hmm.
I left high school just coming out of an EMT course actually at my high school.
Okay.
So my thought was I'm gonna go be an EMT now, right?
Okay.
And so yeah, that's what I left high school with.
And then how did that blossom? What happened? Talk to me about that journey there.
Yeah, so that I think the summer after high school I took an EMT course to like finalize things in that path.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that door was closed because the test was tougher than I prepared for, I guess you could say. Didn't quite go as I'd hoped.
Okay.
So that door closed pretty quick. However, I knew still I wanted something to help people in medicine. I took that, and as I went into college the next fall, my plan was to study pre-med, so biology pre-med, with the hopes of being like a physician's assistant someday.
So this is what led you to becoming the youngest brain surgeon in America.
Yeah, in one timeline. In this timeline, that's not quite how it played out.
So there was a change that happened.
Right.
There was a change that happened. So we came out of high school with this idea of going into something medically related.
Something to help people, yeah. The idea of help people sounds so cool.
But today we find ourselves doing what?
Not medicine. So fast forward to today, almost 10 years later, which is crazy to think about. I work with computers, right? I write code. I do web development. So
Okay.
I work on websites, right? Making them go from nothing to something and building those up.
Okay.
So yeah, complete 180.
And the reason I ask you about that, because so many times in life we have plans. And we have these plans laid out. I know for myself, from the time I was age 11, I had my life planned. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to continue studying martial arts. I wanted to be a professional fighter. And I wanted to be an artist. Those are the things I wanted to be. And I had my plans made. I was going to join the Marine Corps. I was going to travel to the Orient and continue and complete my instruction with some Asian martial arts master, because that's the way it worked in the movies, right? But I had this plan. And then life happens. And then things change, and you don't always get that plan. But I ask you this question because so many times I've heard this said, that the career chooses the man. The career chooses the man. You can have all these plans laid out, have all these steps laid out in order, but then life happens and you find yourself in this corridor where you have to make a decision. So how hard was it for you to make that decision, that change, to go from I'm going to be this doctor to, wow, I'm going to do computers, from working on people to working on inorganics.
Computers, yeah. And seeing nobody sometimes, right? If you work from home, see nobody.
That would drive me crazy. Just want to say for the record, people love people. Those are my kind of people.
I love people too. You're disqualifying me from that. No, it's actually quite the funny story of how I went from like the zigzag in my career, right? And so even in college, like I told you, my freshman year of college was actually studying pre-med in biology. And so again, the same idea of I'm going to go do something in medicine. Second semester of freshman year, I took chemistry, and I was like, okay, let me rethink things. Back to the drawing board.
Okay.
So let me rethink everything. And so after that, I kind of went back to the basics of what do I really enjoy? What, in my character, my personality, how do I operate? And so I found the three things were true, I think it was. I really enjoyed problem solving. I really enjoyed critical thinking. And I really enjoyed being creative.
Okay.
And so in fact, during my time in college, I actually wrote for the school paper. I love to write. I love being creative, telling stories and telling other people's stories as well. But anyway, so those kind of three core ideas, I try to think of what can I do with this? What can I study to really apply these things effectively? And that led me to study just business. You can explore those things.
Right.
So I finished the rest of my college years studying business administration. And I use that to work in marketing because, again, there's a lot of creativity in marketing, as well as problem solving and critical thinking. So, I did that for a while. We're still not quite working with computers yet, so we're still kind of getting to this little jump. So, again, worked in marketing for a while, but I found myself getting kind of burnt out. Creatively, I found myself kind of just dreading the next day of work because it's just the fun had been sucked out of it, so to speak. And so, like I said, after about a year or two, I think, of just working in marketing, I kind of changed my mind. I said, back to the basics again of like, okay, what else do I really enjoy? I went back to those 3 core truths that I found about myself of loving creativity, loving problem solving, and loving critical thinking. If marketing and business isn't really the way I want to go with this, what else can I do with this? And it was funny because I knew nothing about computers at the time. I knew nothing about code. If you said, write on this list, write down what you know, it would be a blank piece of paper.
Right.
And so, but I knew the idea was there of that being interesting. The idea of computers is interesting. And so, I went back to the drawing board and thought, what can I do with this? And then did research on my laptop of how I can learn more about computers and websites and working with code. And I found there was a boot camp in Boise. And so it's kind of funny. I went 4 years to college for a degree I don't really use that much. And then come to find out, I go to a 15-week or a 13-week boot camp to learn computer programming. And that's where my career is now.
Okay.
So that's how we zigzag to where I am today. Long story short.
Now think about it. Because I want to come back to this because so many times, especially when we talk about this journey from boyhood into manhood, that young men are afraid to change a course or change a pattern. And so how difficult was it for you to actually just totally rewrite your pattern for your life? I mean, was that a hard process or was it just kind of a flippant thing? You said, I'll just do this, I'll do that,
No, not at all. It was a big deal too because it really involved a lot of risk. So I didn't know what the end result would be.
Right.
So a lot of it was, a lot of prayer, of course, because they were big decisions. So for example, when I went back to the boot camp to learn computer programming, it was a full-time thing. So you were in class 9 to 5.
Okay.
So what that meant was I had to quit my full-time job I had in marketing.
Okay.
Where I thought I was
committed to this.
Exactly. It was all or nothing. There was no half-stepping, right? There was no, let me test and come back if it's too scary.
Right.
It was, I'm quitting my job. I'm going full-time to learn this new trade.
How about outside support? Do you have outside support for this, or did you have naysayers going, "Oh, Alex, are you sure you want to do this?" Or
oh no,
what were those voices like around you?
Yeah, so at the time, my parents were super supportive, right? They were all about supporting me wherever I went, right? And again, with such big decisions in my life, I've always been somebody who doesn't want to make mistakes. And so what that means is kind of doing my research a little bit and praying on things, right? And really giving things to God because they're so big in my life, right?
Okay.
Like you said, it was a complete career change. I invested 4 years plus whatever high school training I did in something I thought was going to be the future,
right?
Only to decide, never mind. So these are big deals in the life of a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, right? So yeah, so again, I had my parents were super supportive, right? They really wanted to encourage me to do, what I felt my calling was. And so, like I said, yeah, it was a big risk. There were a lot of hurdles to come through. But
now, you mentioned some things here.
I did it.
You mentioned some things here a couple times. We're going to hit on here for a second. I want to come back because I believe, as it was for me, that this becomes the foundational stone from which we build, upon which we build everything else, and we get our careers launched. You mentioned the concept of prayer, and you talked about God. So when we talk about God, what does that mean to you?
Good question. So God is the creator.
I try to ask good questions. Thank you for picking up on that. Go ahead. Yeah.
You're starting now. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Good questions. Yeah, no. So God is the creator, right? God is the reason for all things. I guess my kind of testimony real quick to give you the background on what I think about that is growing up, I always grew up in the church. I was raised in the church, grew up in the church. There's never a time I can remember where Jesus didn't love me, right? I knew all the songs as a kid growing up. So I was raised in that kind of Christian home, always attended church, very involved. So yeah, so like I said, bringing that to tough times and making hard decisions, that was an easy thing to fall back on, right? And be reminded of. That was the lens.
And who is God? Who is Jesus to you today?
He's our Savior. He's my Savior. He's the one that's gotten me from where I was to where I am and where I will be. Okay. So he's the one that's that, as well as the motivation, right? I mean, he's as well, for me, the reason for these things, right? Okay. So quick side story on that note, okay, if you don't mind.
No. Do you guys mind? They said
mind?
No. They said no. Go ahead.
Okay, bring it back to my upbringing, right? In the Christian home, it was instilled in me that we need to be like Christ, and so for me that meant a lot of working hard and pursuing Christ, and so being like Christ to me meant like doing right from wrong, always working hard, not settling, not being complacent in life.
Did that have an impact on your social life? Or how did that impact your social life? Yes, you're a young man. You're in high school. I'm assuming you were a high school athlete, right? So strapping young man, good looking. How did that impact your social life? This decision to obey Christ? How does that impact your social life?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I definitely knew that definitely separated me from some people at school for sure. But a lot of my best friends were from the church as well. People I'd grown up with from the nursery days up to where we were in high school. So a lot of my friends were from the church, my closest friends.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting being in high school. There's a lot of, non-believers or believers of other faiths where you realize, I'm not quite like them, right? Things are a little different.
So now when we think about our faith in this overall pursuit of achieving this idea of man, my philosophy on this is that being an adult is guaranteed as long as you keep living, right? Once you're born, if you keep sucking in air and eating bread, then one day you'll be an adult. You turn 18 and the state will come to you and say, abracadabra, you're now an adult. You're responsible for your own decisions. However, becoming this thing that we call a man is completely different than being an adult. I believe, and I think life proves this out as well as scripture, that you can be 40, 50 years old and still be a child. Still be a child. Paul emphasizes this transition when he says, when I was a child, I thought like a child, I acted like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became a man, I put away my childish things. And so we began to see that there is this transition that is supposed to happen. And we see this in nature when a person is born, and whether they're not born with, as you say, a three-piece suit and a tie on, they're born naked, no teeth, right? And so they have to grow into becoming this thing we would call a man. And so for myself, I remember thinking as I watched the men in my community that surround me, I marked the men that were doing it right, that had families, that came home, that provided for their children, that were there for their wives and not running in the streets all the time. And I never forget how I would, as a young man, especially as a teenager, I'd go out and I'd see these married men and I see them out with women who were not their wives. And I look at them differently when I came back to the neighborhood. I look at them and be like, I saw you. And they look at me like, yeah, you saw me, but I also marked the men that I knew who were at home with their wives, and I watched how they handled themselves. And so for me, early on, I began to mark for myself, I want to be a man, this type of man that not only, quote unquote, was the boss, quote unquote, as we like to say sometimes, but the one who was responsible to a home, responsible to a wife, responsible for his children. I remember telling my wife when we got married, we started talking about the concept of having children. I said, you need to understand something. I said, my children always sleep in the place that I call home. And she said, well, what if we separate someday? I said, well, I'll try my best to talk you out of that, but if you decide you have to leave, I'll let you come visit your children anytime you want. And so we laughed about it, but the idea being is that when I make children, they're my responsibility. They're not the state's responsibility. It's not my neighbor's responsibility. It's not my mother's responsibility. It's my responsibility. So this idea of manhood just kind of envelops everything that we do. So we talked about how you've come up and how you pursued what you thought was going to be your life goal, and you pursued that with tenacity enough to work through and get the degree at university, only to rediscover yourself, and then to have the bravery or the guts enough, or what we call it in the Marine Corps, the intestinal fortitude enough to take that risk, to change, to try something new,
right,
and to reinvent yourself. But in the midst of all that, if I heard you correctly, the one thing that did not change about you was your commitment to serve Christ. And you are still faithful to serve him today. And
Absolutely.
You're holding on to that.
Absolutely.
You're holding on to that unchanging hands, as people used to say.
Right.
And so that commitment to following Christ in an ever-changing world. Because around us, as you know, here in America in the 21st century, the world is changing. Politics is changing. For the first time, we've seen the church, the Christian church in America, come under fire. And it's been attacked. Of course, the attacks are not like they are in Europe, or have been in the past in Europe, but and the rise of Marxism and socialism within the European continent. But the same types of attacks are starting to happen here. They don't have the groundwork to where they can be as blatant about it yet, but those things are happening. And it's going to take young men to rise up, because the church, and this is going to make you mad, I'm going to say it anyway though, God never intended for women to lead the church. He called for men. And so, as I sit here and talk to this young man and get to see his star rising in the horizon of life, I want to encourage all of you guys to get behind the understanding of what it means to be a man in this world today. To rise up, because your family, your community needs to see you become men, not these older versions of boys who spend all their time and all their energy on how to satisfy themselves. So take a moment, get behind the why, and find out who this Jesus is that Alex has found and who I've been talking about. And you too can be a part of this thing we call the new life. If you have any questions what it means to become a child of God, hit me up in the comments. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Until then, the Lord bless you and keep you. And remember, get behind the why. Peace. We're out.